Hello and welcome to this video on a steady state fit Metalloid Percussion, a dual channel metallic style synth voice. Let's check out what's to come. This video is sponsored by Steady State Fit. Now the Metalloid Percussion is the newest in the line of entity percussion focus modules from Steady State Fit. But if you've seen my videos on the Ultra Kick or the Ultra Perc, you'll know that these go way beyond, and Andrew from Steady State Fit designs in kind of whole mini modular systems into these modules while keeping them compelling and simple to use. Metalloid Percussion focuses on metallics. There's FM ring modulated complex oscillators inside that you can bend and twist via controls and modulation that then hit two channels of VCAs and multimode filters. So you can trigger this to create percussion, you can sequence it like a normal synth voice. There's lots to go at, so let's just get into those features and then into the patches. Now at the core of the module, there's 3 analog oscillators that go through ring modulation, as well as having an FM bus, and that splits into 2 separate paths A and B where we have decay envelopes, multimode filters and VCAs to create these sounds. We can mix and blend these together, trigger them and modulate them separately, so we'll go through the features here while also listening to the sounds. We'll start by just listening to channel A, and I'm going to use an offset voltage to the VCA CV to just open up that channel with its filter wide open so we can explore the core tones. We have our main tuning control, and a variant control that will vary the frequencies of the 3 internal oscillators and their relationships between each other. We then have a material macro control, which is an FM bus with different settings. Just to explore these filters, we have low pass, band pass, and high pass. And note these 2 separate paths A and B do sound different. They're related tones from the core of this complex metal synthesis style circuit, but they will sound different. So I'll open up the filters and we'll swap from A to B there. So related but different tones. The trigger controls both A and B here unless we trigger B separately. From nice short clicks to much longer sounds. And you can send that decay to modulate the filter as well. If I bring in B, this is being triggered from the same trigger through that normalizing. Turning down A here. Let's set up a higher, high-passed tone. Let's actually trigger B separately with a different rhythm. So as I come out of A that mixes these outputs, we get blends of these 2 sounds. Now we have a choking system where we can choke B from A or A from B. And this is a volume ducking effect as opposed to playing around with those triggers. So you can get really nice dynamic open and closed like hi-hats from this, or just more interesting ducking interactive percussion. You have CV over the tuning, the variant and the material controls. We're triggering both decays here separately for the VCAs and filters. You can access both VCAs via external CV, you can control the cutoffs via external CV, and also modulate those decay times. And you can also come out of B that will cut that mix normalizing and always be B, so you could use these in say stereo, or patch them out to different points of a system. That's a quick look through the features. We'll explore more of these in the patches. They're on screen and I'll link down below for you to skip around. There's lots to go through, from trying to emulate more classic electronic percussion to more weird and wonderful metallic sounds throughout. So without further ado, let's just dive in. So here we're looking at some highly animated, dynamic percussion sounds. So first, let's look at everything that's not coming from the Metalloid. Now channel A has an LFO to panning and some stepped random change of its filtering. Removing those. This is being choked against sound B. As I set this to choke against B, we have an open and closed style shifting, choking, ducking hi-hat. Adding in this blue trace here, stepped random to the filter cutoff. And then channel B has another LFO panning it, and again, independent stepped random to the filter cutoff. Here it is without. Really interesting percussion sounds. Adding in the green trace here, stepped random to cutoff. So both outputs, independent panning and independent stepped random filtering. Bringing back in my offbeat hi-hat, which is just a sample from another module. Snare. Kick and bass line as well. So here's an idea for creating more subtle stereo hi-hats. They are different in tone, hard left and right. It's the two channels, hard left and right, on vortices here. But they're not totally wild, just totally independent parts going on. There's still a nice kind of unified feeling to them. Kick from the Ultra Kick. Massive whack of a snare from the Ultra Perc. Some Mind Phaser and Dipole bass. And A and B here, hard left and right, from a single trigger rhythm. Now removing these, this is my trigger rhythm on the Eloquencer. And then I'm using an accent pattern to two different envelopes and patching those envelopes into the VCA bias. We've either triggering the module, we can just use independent envelopes to open those sides, which also means you could add attack and not just have triggered percussion sounds. So this rhythm to trigger both, taking advantage of the normalizing. And they do sound different, as we've seen in the rest of the video. It's not exactly the same coming into these A and B channels. But nice short hi-hat there. And then the first accent rhythm. And then the second accent rhythm to B. Notice there's just one step different as I move between these accent patterns. So they're exactly the same, except that one step difference creating this stereo, more obvious change in sound to go with the slightly different tones. So here I'm using the Metalloid to create snares, nice clangorous electronic snare drum type sounds, and to create this reverse swelling sound as well. Here's Metalloid dry. You can hear this snare-like sound and that reverse-like sound. Removing the reverse for now. I'm looking at A and B here like two parts of how you typically synthesize a snare drum. One is the body, kind of metal or wooden shell, the drum itself, and the noisier, rattling top element, which would be the snare wires underneath the drum. Now turning up A, this is what I'm treating as the body, with a low pass filter here. And it's just this kind of electronic thump, which is serving as the drum. Section B, set to be a high pass filter, slightly longer decay, no filter mod, and just focused in on that noisy top end. So then together, it gives our snare-like sound. Now just listening to B, plugging in this rising exponential envelope, I'm triggering an envelope 2 steps earlier than where I want this to land, so that the envelope then has time to rise up and hit perfectly in time with the trigger on my main beats in the sequence. Bit of reverb, drums back in. We have a nice electronic snare with a nice reverse sample or rising swelling effect sucking into that beat. So here we're looking at dynamic triggers. Triggers that change in level, which is this blue trace here on the second channel, as well as creating a little sound effect, and doing that within this beat. Now channel B here is what we're using for our dynamic triggers. It's got some filter modulation that we'll just remove for now, and it's this blue trace, blue cable coming into trigger B. If I make these all the same level, it's playing this kind of wonky ratcheting rhythm. Now if I make them slope down, so they start at full level and the level of the triggers decreases, notice how this is responding dynamically. We have the louder going quieter notes there. If I go the other way, starting quiet and ramping up, you hear this swell, this kind of bloom of level across this little burst of rhythm. The yellow trace is filter modulation, and that's just adding a kind of tonal swell along with the dynamic triggering. Now channel A is triggered by the green trace, green cables, red trace is modulating its cutoff. And that's also modulating pan, and I have it here to modulate, say, the tuning. To really kind of emphasize this effect. Variant works well. So together, so dynamically responding triggers and some wonky sound effects to go with it. So here we're using the Metalloid to synthesize electronic clap sounds. Now if I take that out of the mix, now here's Metalloid by itself, we're listening to the A output. If I just trigger this from a normal trigger from my sequencer, it's more snare-like, just that single hit. But by triggering a burst generator and using a short burst of 4 triggers, we start to get into this clap-like territory, and classic drum machines, certainly the XOX series of drums from Roland, you can see on the waveform that the claps come from this burst of triggers on the way in. If we turn decay down and open this burst up a bit, some more time between the triggers, you can see and hear these 4 triggers much more clearly. Mix back in. I've said in videos before that Andrew kind of puts whole mini modular systems in his modules, just pairing this with a random step. Nice percussive, sharp, kind of plucky, almost low pass gate sounds. Complex FM, ring mod, and feedback like tones. Now the A output is hard panned in my mixer, as is the B output there. Slightly different trigger patterns, lots of random voltages into the parameters, and 2 LFOs. And a whole complex, almost modular rig of tone in that one module. Now one of my Patreon supporters, Richie Tech, told me to rag this around like blush response. I asked them what they wanted to hear from the Metalloid as I was working on the video. And while I'm no Joey, blush response, I'm more than happy to oblige in ragging the thing around. So here we're going to look at the choking. I have a kick and a snare, and 2 sounds coming out separately into my mixer here. Sound A is more of an open style hi-hat, and B, a shorter closed hat-like sound. And as these play together, the choke is in the middle, the sounds are just overlapping in the mix. Now if I move the choke over to A will choke from B. This is actual side chaining, and hopefully you can hear this sound is ducking, like it's being ducked like a side chain in a compressor. You get this really interesting pumping tail. Let's do that over the kick and snare. It's got this kind of thing going on. So here's another example of the choking with a ride-like and whatever sound this is, like percussion sound. Now here's both channels together in my mixer. I'm just muting them externally. And if I choke A from B, you can hear this sidechain compression ducking style effect in play. And if I choke B, this is long and dominant enough of a sound on A here that B just turns into these short little blips that are just being choked out. As I bring the decay on A back down, the sound comes back through. Let's unmute A again. As I make it longer, you can hear it mute out or choke out that other sound. Likewise on A, if we leave A quite long and we're choking A from B, short sounds there on B don't do much to choke this sound out. So it's a really interactive, dynamic choking. So I was setting up for another patch and stumbled on this kind of video game-esque, almost like coin collection sound, level up, power up kind of thing. It's just a cool and different sound. so I wanted to show you it. So this patch started with me wanting to make some kind of cymbal-like sounds, and ended up with a ride and crash, or at least functional rides and crashes in terms of how they sit over this beat. I have two parts going on here, B and A. B is serving as a kind of ride cymbal, playing quarter notes. It does a really nice job set over that beat. Where you might put like a 909 ride cymbal. And then A has some probability, it's not triggering at the start of every bar. So that's working like a crash. And with this particular setting here, so much grittier sound, very angular, dissonant kind of crash and punctuation of the beat together. So A, crash, B, ride. There's some nice metallic, angular cymbal-like tones over the top of these other drum sounds. If you'd like a full patch breakdown of everything else that's going on here, head over to patreon.com/DivKid, where you can get the exclusive video that I'm going to make about this patch. So I've had a bit of a fever for Cowbell. And we can get lots of metallic cowbell-like clangorous tones out of Metalloid percussion. And just for reference, I was using an 808 cowbell as a kind of guide. That sounds here external to the module. And while this doesn't sound like an 808 cowbell, it kind of serves the same function in a beat. It's made up of two layers, A there, and B, and they combine to give that kind of clangorous metallic tone. And while not a clone of an 808 cowbell, for the clangorous and cowbell inclined among you, you can get some metallic cowbell-like sounds. So this is another one of those patches where you kind of feel like Andrew at SSF's put a whole mini modular system in a module. This is going to just be all about dynamic patching, dynamic trigger responses, and emphasising that with a bit of sequenced modulation as well as dynamic triggers. But just with this bit of feedback here, we've almost got this like plucked string F-no instrument thing going on, alongside some almost short percussive tabla-like sounds. So removing everything here, this patch started with this slightly shuffled clock signal. That's going to the input of a VCA, and this stepped sequence from the same sequencer is controlling the CV level of the VCA. The output of that is the yellow trace, and that's what's triggering the Metalloid percussion. And you can see it gives us dynamic triggers. Triggers that are differing in level, and we can hear that this responds really nicely and dynamically. I'm then going to modulate filter cutoff with this same sequence. And just attenuating that sequence, opening an attenuator here. I can also modulate, say, the decay of the envelope. And let's just say the VCA CV as well. It's a really dynamic sound because of this extra sequencing on top of the already dynamic response to dynamic triggers. It's locking in and out of this kind of feedback tone. Giving us this weird alien-like version of, say, some ethnic percussion and plucked string sounds. So this started building up kind of transitional sound effects, swooshes and drops. It almost sounds like a kind of Star Wars pod racer. It could be like a laser cannon discharging in a video game. I'm using this green trace here to control the tuning, the main pitch of all the oscillators, and to also fade in channel A on its VCA CV. Without that, we're just waiting for a trigger to give us our sound. There's this huge cavernous reverb. Let's lose that. This is now dry. I have two LFOs that also ramp up in speed from, again, this green trace, green envelope here. Let's get that making this rise again. And the longer fall there is giving channel A a much longer, slower decline. So this patch started with me trying to get some shaker sounds and looking at using the VCAs rather than the triggers here, and the CV for these VCAs with an envelope that's just got a slight rise on it, creating more of a maraca style sound. But it's moved on to something more interesting, which is what keeps happening as I'm making these patches. And here's the Metalloid with the same envelope, this yellow trace here, into the VCA CVs, both blended on one output. Now I thought, well, I can still trigger these from different rhythms. Triggering of A and B separately to add into this rhythm. And I'm using the main rhythm, screen trace that is the envelope controlling these VCAs, to control variant. Bringing these really lovely, glitchy, tonal, chirpy sounds in. Extra drums back in. So here I'm using the Metalloid Percussion as a stereo resonator for my patch. So here's my droning saw wave, it's the green trace here that you're listening to in the mixer, as well as it triggering the Metalloid Percussion that's currently muted. And I'm just going to move the coarse tuning around just down off screen here. Now muting that, here that is triggering Metalloid Percussion. Blue and yellow cables and traces here are coming into a stereo channel, so they're hard left and right. Now as I move the pitch around, we're getting a sort of hard sync effect, but it's these core controls for tuning, variant, that really define the sound. If I get the pitch sequence back into my oscillator, you can hear it's in there. It's in the background, but this is very much resonating. So by using an envelope to the VCA over on the Vortices mixer, same envelope to filter cutoffs, and turning cutoffs down, we have these little metallic resonances. Filtered wave from the stereo dipole, this mixed back on top. So after playing around with the Metalloid as a resonator for an oscillator, I wanted to run some beats through it. That's what I'm doing here. Here's my beat, the Ultra Kick, Ultra Perc, and some extra percussion samples from 909 hats and rim shots. There's an additional bass sound coming through the dipole. And here's the output of the Metalloid percussion, where the trigger input is the drums. This whole drum beat has been split in my mult, coming back into the mixer here, so we can hear it dry. And there it is, the trigger in, with stepped random signals coming into the decay and the filter cutoffs. So together, this gives this wonderfully crunchy resonator sound over the beats. So I wanted to slow things down and see if we could get some gong-like tones. And it's certainly much more fizzy and almost kind of like digital artifact type sounding, and it's completely analog. If I just turn down B and we listen to A for a second, let's remove some of this fizz with the low pass filter and then bring some back in at the point of impact, the start of that note, that gong being struck, by adding some filter mod. Let's see what's happening on B. I think that can just ring a bit duller there when they're combined. Just play around with variations in these core oscillator tunings. And for those that are into modular to try and make gong sounds, we're kind of there. Joking aside, I'm not really trying to make a gong, I'm just looking at what this can do. And again, the range of harmonics and the difference in them on those sides, here in stereo as well, combines to create a really interesting gong-like cymbal tone. So let's take a look at audio rate modulation, and you can audio rate pretty much anything that's on here. Right now I'm modulating with a triangle wave, the VCA CV for channel A. B is turned down, there's no triggers, and as I turn up the rate of modulation, play with a filter on channel A, see if we get some triggers going as well. Again, just down here off screen, I'm playing with the rate and this oscillator that's coming into VCA CV. Let's try modulating, say, the cutoff. Lots of those nice audio rate filter modulation overtones that you might be familiar with. Channel B, let's try cut off there. Makes that really nice and crunchy and fizzy. With both of them playing, we could try, say, that core tuning. Much more intense injection of FM there. So if you're at this point in the video, go drop a hard sync in the comments. What were your favourite patches? Was it the weirder ones? Was it the ones that hint at more traditional percussion? I'd love to know what you thought and which was your favourite kind of sound out of the Metalloid percussion. There's exclusives from this video that you can gain access to over on patreon.com/DivKid. Hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.